Testing 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. No. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello. Okay. So it seems like it's working, so we're going to get back to the meeting. All right, continue your update. This time with the volume on. I think in reflection of what Councillor Hennessy said, the last sentence is probably a little bit redundant anyway, because I think the first part of that paragraph says part of a growth corridor, which is basically the intent of the paragraph anyway. So I think we could modify perhaps that paragraph to say history and character district, which is different from that of City of Playford. There is that's the whole debate, if you like to call it that, on the southern rural areas. So I think we could probably pick up the sentiment of what Councillor Hennessy said and not detract from what the brief is trying to do anyway. So I'm happy to, if with agreement of council, make a minor modification of that. Without going into the specifics of how I modify, I might just delete some words on the first point. So do we go to the second point? Okay, Councillor Hennessy on the second point referred to the Council Community Plan 2030. All I pointed out was that on page 8 of the brief, there is a pyramid, which when you zoom it, yes, it's a small drawing, I concede. But when you zoom it in on the right-hand bottom side is Council Community Plan 2030. But I'm certainly happy to modify page 18 to put it higher on the list of items. So that's 2 out of 2 for you, Councillor Hennessy. We'll go to the third one, which is in regards to infrastructure. At the end of the day, a land use infrastructure framework is exactly what it comes up as. So it does deal with land use questions of zoning, road infrastructure, other related matters to do with buildings and assets required to be delivered. But I also take on board the comment, which is it's within the context of a community dealing with change. And I'm happy to make that modification. I think it certainly is the right sentiment, so I'm happy to put that through. So that's 3 of 3. And then the final one, we can perhaps agree to slightly disagree, perhaps. Essentially, what we're trying to say here is that with a fairly significant reliance on out of Gawler employment for our local residents, that has impacts on road infrastructure in terms of congestion. It also means people are driving out of area, and that usually is a correlation between driving out of area and shopping out of area as well. And it's always a general aspiration of communities to always increase their local employment within reason and in an orderly fashion. And certainly that's what the adopted economic development strategy says. And that's something which the 30-year plan no doubt will cast its mind to as well. But we're probably just talking around the edges here as to whether, that 59% comes down to 55% or 50% at some point in time. But I think the aspiration we've got is reasonable. But I'm happy to answer any questions on that issue.
Deputy Mayor.
Just on page 20 of 163 of the attachments, and I'm sorry, I was still doing some of my last minute reading last night, but for the life of me, I couldn't. So PCG is Project Control Group, SWG and EMT are those abbreviations, and I feel stupid for asking, but I've spent too long trying to search for it.
Yeah, well, EMT, I don't think you're an emergency medical executive management.
Yes, okay, thank you. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
We love that language. So executive management team, the PCG is a project control group, and the SWG is basically a steering working group. So it's a larger level, it's a higher level than the PCG. PCG is a fairly operational. So generally speaking, staff, intermediate level within the organisation. But if you like, the SWG is more the management team within council, but not necessarily the executive team. That's all.
All right. Any other feedback, Deputy Mayor?
So just reading through it, obviously we've had some discussions about opportunities for economic growth and commercial partnership, just all that jazz that we discussed when I moved the Gawler 42 idea. I'm reading through this, you've captured the revision of our town centre framework. You've also talked about the opportunities or the availability for commercial space and all that. Is that the crux of that is the attempt to try to capture that sort of sentiment and also try to unpack that? That's what I read it as anyway, but.
Through the chair. That's correct. I had a chance earlier to explain to councillors, but we would expect to see at the August IES a draft report, which will be the modelling on retail demand for area to 2046, which is part of phase 1 of the parking deck study. So that's a linear group. They'll probably also give us a progress report on how they're going with shortlisting sites for potential future deck car parks. But going back to the issue of retail and commercial floor demand, the gist of what they're doing is looking at where we have competitive strengths. So that would be things like we have a strong night scene, if you like, in regards to hotels and places of entertainment, and they are strong businesses, if you like. So how do you leverage off that in terms of perhaps accommodation, for example, as opposed to just Airbnb? So where are the synergies in terms of where our areas of strength are? It might be we can energise the main street more in terms of not just service commercial in terms of real estate agents or lawyers or whatever, but maybe more in the space of fine food product, for example. So it's about activation in different ways. And I guess that strategy or that study will tell us where the opportunities will be. So I would see the 2046 building on that, which will go back to questions of brand and inevitably how aspirational and maybe how we might update the CBD plan, particularly in light of what Wendy's team is doing with the integrated transport plan, about a hierarchy of open space and roads and networks and how we actually get around Gawler. So they're all connected.
sorry, I won't have the mic here, but I was just, so just on that, we've touched on the main street, and I think which is good. That's one of our important precincts. But also the opportunity to see what we may have in potential other areas. You know, at the moment we're discussing a contentious bulky good, as we won't revisit that at this point in time at this meeting. But moving forward, you know, what happens when the next bulky good opportunity comes in? Where are we looking? Is there potential to activate the Tiver Road differently? Is there a Jack Cooper Drive option there that's close to the expressway? Is this plan also looking at that holistic, or I guess the pros and cons of should this happen, what would then happen to our infrastructure? Like, how does that all tie in together?
Through the chair. Inevitably, when we're talking about growth in Gore, it's not just residential growth. So it will be about business and commercial employment, perhaps light industrial as well. We have a lack of supply in that space. So when we say employment zone land, we don't necessarily mean in the vernacular of, we'll use it for doors. It doesn't have to be about that at all. And in fact, even if you did that development, if it ever got through, then it provides its own supply, but then you still have the same shortage. Yeah. So I think we need to have a longer term view about what employment land looks like within the light commercial industrial idea. It may not have anything to do with bulky goods or homemaker centres at all. But we've got existing businesses in rural zones, for example, on Main North Road. We're sort of venturing into the topic of southern rural areas now a little bit, but there's a briefing on that soon as well. So I would see the southern rural areas and 2046 being done concurrently. There's a lot of balls in the air, if you like. You know, the traffic study, the 2046 plus parking plus southern rural areas, the things we haven't resolved over the last 20 to 30 years, but bringing together at the same time gives us a more integrated solution.
Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andrew, in the Gawler Transport and Traffic Management Plan, and you've probably heard me go on about the buses that run around our town empty. And this was introduced into our town because of a member for Light, Tony Piccolo, an ex-mayor, and felt the need for it. Where does these buses that are running around now using up stacks of fuel, where does that fit into the future plan in Gawler? Because I've tried now quite a number of times to ask for the route of that bus to be changed, where it's missing out on people that use large facilities. The Hillier Resident Park is going to be twice its size, and the bus doesn't pull up out the front, it pulls up out in another road, so no one's going to walk out there. Just where do those buses fit, and is there any plan of the future before they shut them down and say we can't afford it anymore?
All right, well, we'll hear from Richard, who's here on the staff table for the first time, I think.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something we'll be looking at as part of the integrated transport plan, to look at, I guess, what the patronage and demand is for the existing services, and I guess also where there might be holes in the system. I suppose just because the buses are empty, it might be symbolic as well as to what as whether the services are effective. So that's another discussion that we need to have. So we've been in discussion with the department already about those matters.
Yep.
Appreciate that. I think the big part about it is that so many times that residents, I mean, we hear that there's a bus, you can call a bus and, you know, they'll call and pick you up and all that sort of thing. And this council has spent a hell of a lot of money on bus stops that never get anybody stand there on them. And I can point out 4 bus stops on one street up in Gawler East here that only one has ever been used. I think that's where, you know, a little bit more attention we may be able to work with you on that, to be able to put the stops or promote it. But we never seem to promote these beautiful buses running around town. If you go on bus 42, they play country music. If you go on bus 30 odd, I think they're on jazz and so forth. So they're friendly people. So we're not using them though. And I'll tell you, I noticed it again the other day, empty buses, and it doesn't seem right.
Are you wanting to respond?
Through the chair. Look, I guess that's something we're happy to look into a little bit more and suppose just get down to the bottom of, I guess, maybe why people aren't using it or whether the current buses are providing the right level of service. So we're happy to look into those discussions as part of this.
Yeah, and I think there is some, state government is doing some bus timetable changes soon because when the train line has fully electric trains, the timetable's going to change also, which is going to also change the bus routes connected to it. And I think that's coming up in the near future. It's just been delayed because they didn't have a full set of electric trains, but yeah, we'll look into that further. Is there other discussion? If there's not, we can go back into the regular meeting and ask for a mover for councillor Hennessy. I assume this is receives as amended?
It's as amended, or as, yeah, with the amendments discussed, the Gawler 24, well, the whole 3 points, I'm happy to move.
All right, do you wish to speak?
Nope, thank you. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for coming out so that we could discuss it further. But no, I think we've covered everything. Thank you.
So just say as amended, we don't. Yeah. All right, do we have a seconder? Councillor Lorna, do you wish to speak? Any other discussion? First, Councillor Solomon.
Just quickly, because I think the report does touch on a little bit some of the identity issues in there, and obviously that's something which we're going to need to flesh out at some stage. I think that's very much the substance of some of those questions which are at the end of the recommendation there. Oh, sorry, at the report there. What I would say is that I think the town is changed. The view of the people who live in our town is changing. And we need to have a close look at what that means for the identity of our town. But I do want to make sure that in highlighting that we are unique, because Gawler does have a unique township, we're not creating a fiction, which is that we have at some point in history, or we continue to exist in isolation from those to the south, those to the north or the south as part of the region. I think that us being unique as a town doesn't necessarily mean that we are just a single entity in the middle of nowhere. We have neighbours, and we should be leveraging that collaborative opportunities where they exist, both in metropolitan Adelaide and in the greater region, where we're able to look at both service delivery, but also infrastructure delivery as well. And especially with Concordia coming on board, I think that's particularly important to look at. I know there's conversations about boundary reform, which are sort of separate, but connected to this. But I think especially at the moment where Concordia sits in the Barossa, it's really important that we do look at that aspect of it as well.
All right, Andrew, you wanted to clarify something?
Further to my initial comment on point 1, I would like to suggest this to the councillors, and you can either nod or shake your head. With respect to the last sentence of paragraph 1 of the brief, I think my suggestion would be as follows. The sentence would read accordingly. Gawler also contains significant heritage buildings and comprises a community that has a history and character distinct from its rapidly developing southern neighbour, the city of Playford. I think that's the intent of what you meant. I don't think you would want to put a statement saying we do not see ourselves as part of metropolitan Adelaide. I just think that's too black and white. If you're generally happy with that, we can tweak some words to that effect.
Yep.
Was the original suggestion just the removal of some words in there? Just 'cause
Yeah.
if we don't need to make the distinction between. Oh, sorry.
See itself part of metropolitan Adelaide, it does not see itself part of metropolitan Adelaide. So it completely 180 degrees turn the statement around. But I think we agree on the intent. It's just about how we fix those words up.
You're on.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I was gonna go into some complicated too. I was just to say, if we don't need to make a distinction between us and Playfield, I'd rather not, but then is that not the purpose of what the paragraph's saying, is to make that distinction? So that's all right. That's, yes, I'm happy with that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and also thank you, Andrew, for the report, and the project briefing. I see this as the starting talking point. I mean, there are a lot more questions, I think, to come, but I do appreciate the mapping out of the process. I think I saw 3 information briefings in there that you're hoping to hold with elected members at key points through the process, which I think, you know, when we're talking about the nitty gritty, the boots on ground sort of stuff, is when we're going to start seeing them flow through. So that's some good feedback there. Also just running through the briefing of the language throughout. I stupidly started watching Utopia. And I can't unread some things here. So where I'm seeing 6 or 7 dot points, I'm automatically summing up in one sentence. So just flagging that early. And that's my mistake. I admit that, but now I'm hooked. So, but look, yeah, moving forward, I think the project briefing and the way that we're going to go about it, I think is going to be good. And the information briefings that are going to come through it is where that back and forth questions is going to come forward, because making a plan to make a growth framework is something that isn't necessarily normal to the average punter. So helping us being able to sell it out there is going to be paramount to being able to make this successful, and also capturing some of that discussion I think we do need around where our commercial precincts are, where our residential precincts are, where our aged care precincts are, you know, and really map out, which is again that discussion around the Gawler 42 that I had, which, you know, I'm optimistic that we're going to sort of somewhat get there, but yeah, look forward to working together to achieve that. So yeah, look, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation on this one, and look forward to the first information briefing to come.
Councillor Sample?
Yeah, that's very good, Councillor Shank. I agree with you too. If I can to you, Andrew, how important is the identity factor of our community? We hear about the Barossa, you know, the Valley of the Vines. The other day I was at the Clare Gourmet Festival weekend, you know, and the public relation person got up and said, here we are in the middle of the Clare Valley, mid-north, the Valley of the Vines. I mean, how important is it? I mean, the other day I took the CEO and Wendy for a drive to try and get this message out there. Even Peter Goers, whether you listen to him or not, I don't know, he's a pretty good bloke. He still says, whenever he says Gawler, the best of town and country. Now, I took the CEO and Wendy out the other day, and I think Wendy, I can say, she was quite amazed, because within 2 kilometres of this town, you would swear you're in the country straight away. Now, what do we want to call ourselves, you know, and how important is Gawler to have a true identity? Because it's been tried many times through the schools. There was a project went right through the school. Please give Gawler an identity. Guess what? Nobody come up with anything. The fellow that invented Humphrey B. Bear, he was the one that brought up the theme. Alex Bean, who lives up the top of Williston, he was the one that said the best of town and country. It rings. So how important is that, or some other identity for Gawler?
Through the chair, we've probably spent 170 years debating what our brand is, and I know in our budget discussions we talked about whether the brand should be an above the line project. I'm mindful of not saying 2046 is going to solve everyone's problems and have all the solutions. I don't think any strategy can do that by itself. I think it can bring those issues to the table, and I think hopefully when we have some resources next financial year, if we do, and we talk about branding and how we market the town, how we look at land use decisions in broader high level context, you know, about which areas we're doing for this activity or that activity, those things, they're all part of questions of brand. I'm not gonna say here and now that I'll have the solution for you in 12 months' time, but certainly we'll give it a bit of a thrashing around and hopefully come much closer to a set of propositions as to what we think it might be.
Any other discussion? If not, is the mover happy to, yep, I'll put the motion, all those in favour, carried unanimously. Move on to 7.2, Gawler 2046 Integrated Transport Strategy. Are there any, there's no questions, we can move on to someone happy to move it? Or if there are questions, yeah, councillor Hennessy,
I'm happy to move it.
great, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you. No, I'm fairly, I thank the officer for the report. I think it's fairly straightforward and I look forward to the next stage.
And councillor Sample, you wish to speak? No. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor first and then councillor Solomon.
Yeah, I think I've provided this feedback before, but I just really wanted to make it clear is, again, I'm liking the way that these two are coming through as a partnership, even though they're standalone projects. Because the traffic management is a massive beast. So I understand why it is a standalone project, but you know, I think keeping them partnered together in an agenda in a meeting, I think is a really well thought out process. And hopefully, you know, the information briefings and stuff like that will keep on following that, because again, although they're standalone projects, the linkages of them are so clear as well. So I understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And I think it's a really good way forward. Same sort of notes. I'm liking the strategy. I'm liking the plans on engagement and again paralleling through. I do note the budget being a bigger sort of figure, but I understand I am understanding of what is required in that space on the data gathering side as well, because you know where the previous report talked about unpacking the aspirations and auditing the strategies we already have and trying to look at it as a holistic. This is down to the nitty gritty data gathering, what it currently sits, the auditing of the kilometres and kilometres of road, that sort of sphere. So I understand that, but yeah, the two paralleling I think is a really good move moving forward. I'm happy to support the recommendation.
All right, councillor Solomon.
Probably sound like a broken record because every time transport comes up, I'll mention public transport, but I think it's once again good to see that really highlighted in here and hear a little bit about some of the potential plans for that as well. Public transport, of course, is a wonderful thing. It's brilliant for the environment. When you have high density urban living, you need reliable public transport. I think especially with growth in the area, it's important that we have public transport that makes sense and that is well integrated. So I once again just outline that, and of course, people walking in the main street, people in those main sort of connector hub areas, if you like, is valuable to businesses as well. So public transport is always the way to go. In my view, it takes cars off the road and it saves ratepayers lots of money on infrastructure costs when it comes to roads, ratepayers and taxpayers, I should say.
Any other discussion? If not, is the mover happy for us to move the motion, or you want to speak?
Yeah, just to echo councillor Solomon, but also to point out that I too was pleased with public transport, but also the walking and cycling paths. As we know, they actually have the added advantage of allowing aged care transport paths safe paths around the town. So it's good to see that that's included as well. But other than that, no, thank you very much.
I will put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Move on to 7.3, Concordia update and submission on Barossa Council growth and infrastructure investment issues paper. Councillor Koch.
I've got a series of questions. Do you want
Sure.
to, okay. I'm just looking at the attachment on page, starts on page, I'll get to it. 59 of 163. So that, I assume these are these investigations that have been completed, is that right? Through the chair?
Yeah, just given time to
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it. Um,
Okay. So I'd like to make some comments about some of those investigations and how it may affect Gawler.
So if you've got comments rather than questions,
Yeah.
that can be part of the debate or the motion. Because we haven't moved into a,
I could ask a whole series of questions. Do you want to suspend meeting procedure again, or?
we can, is there support for suspending meeting procedure? Yep, we can suspend meeting procedure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I suppose when I look at this, I'm just a little bit concerned that all of this is going to, all this approval process is going to occur in 16 and a half months, which I think is quite rapid. I'm just concerned that some of the information here are probably more aspirational, and I'm just concerned that really that whether there's going to be some thorough investigation in some of these items. For example, when we go down to infrastructure, yeah, okay, on page 61 of 163 talks about identifies both conventional and innovative solutions for water, sewage, stormwater, energy services. Now, when we had Springwood, we had a whole range of ideas that were going to happen up there. For example, they were going to put up their own sewage farm up at Springwood. And when they actually did the calculations, they worked out they'd use up all the flat land. And when you put the buffer zone in, you wouldn't be able to put any houses in. So that went by and by. And then they talked about water harvesting and a whole range of things that went by and by. They also talked about energy solutions, and that basically went by the by. So I'm just concerned that we get comments here in reports saying we're going to do all these wonderful things, and people get really excited about it, because I would get really excited about these innovations, but I don't know whether people are actually looking at whether it's feasible and whether it's actually going to occur. And we could be running, people get all excited without actually doing the feasibility studies and whether they're actually going to happen, because we've seen it up at Springwood. And I suppose the next one is.
So, sorry, to give
Yeah.
Andrew the chance to respond.
Okay, just to respond.
Through the chair, it's certainly noted that the process of Springwood or Gawler East wouldn't be perhaps the model of how you'd want to go about Concordia. And those with the long memories like yourself clearly have reflections of what that process looked like and how it worked. It's fair to say also that these studies, looking at them randomly from 2018, 2016, 2017, that they're 5, 6, 8 years old in some cases. And I'm mindful of how far I can go in terms of specifics, given I've signed a confidentiality agreement with the government. But it's fair to say that any work that's been done will be re-reviewed, and that's been put on the table. I think even when Plus did the presentation to council, they said we would be using previous work and updating it. So you would expect, because they've said they'll do it, that they'll review and make sure that whatever's been done before is relevant to the latest version of the master plan. But the main difference really between Gawler East and Concordia is that this is going through a process whereby, unless the agreements are in place on infrastructure delivery, and unless there is a blueprint for infrastructure full stop, the rezoning doesn't proceed. That's not what happened at Gawler East. It got rezoned, then everyone started running around trying to work out how to make it work. And that we're still to a degree doing that, yes.
I suppose the next one is the rail connection. Because on page 62 of 163, it talks about at-grade connection, I suppose. It's talking about at-grade connection with the Gawler railway station, is that right? Because they're actually talking about at-grade. It says, being the existing rail reserve at grade is the most feasible, I suppose. So that's saying just connecting in with the Gawler railway station. And my concern there is, if that's the case, you'll probably close down Gawler every 15 minutes at peak time. As you'd have to shut, because if it's that grade, you're basically shutting down Gawler basically every 15 minutes at peak time. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
It's certainly fair to say that's what is referred to in the paperwork that you're quoting. That's not to say that's where either the proponent or the state government thinks it's going to fly in the end. Ultimately, that will be tested further. I think, again, referring back to what was public knowledge, when they spoke at the council meeting or briefing, it was said that they will be revisiting documents from the past. And I don't think there is a settled position, but ultimately they'll come back to council once they believe they've got some viable opportunities and options. But I would have thought from just a local planning point of view, it would be quite challenging to having a road closed off every 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I think there'd be other solutions you'd probably want to investigate before you did that.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with the new train schedule as well. Currently Gawler Central only goes every half an hour. Only the 15-minute ones stop at Gawler station.
Yes, I know, but they're actually talking about servicing a population of Gawler at Concordia. And for example, in Victoria, they're taking away all their at-grade crossings and putting in other bits and pieces. I suppose the next one I've got concern about is the connection to the Sturt Highway. The proposal is that it goes, you need to get over the North Para somehow, and that's quite expensive. And you need to actually connect that with the Sturt Highway, which I think would be quite expensive. It's also, I don't know who's going to pay for that. I mean, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So obviously that needs to be sorted out. Yeah, that's sort of big concerns. Yeah, they're my main concerns. Actually, and the wastewater. Also, there's also the water that you'd need for that for Concordia. There's some talk about harvesting water from the North Para. That's fine in winter. You can harvest water in winter, but in summer you'd have to store it. You've got to store it somewhere. And in summer you've got huge evaporation rates, and that's when you need the water to irrigate. So I don't know. It's sort of very. When I read it, it's very exciting, and we're going to do all these wonderful, innovative things. But when you come down to actually looking at the feasibility of something, and the cost benefit analysis, I just get really concerned that people are going to run away, get really excited and just run away with the ideas and just start approving things without sort of doing that detailed investigation and actually looking at the costs and the consequences. So that's my concerns. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
So just to clarify, how many PCG meetings have been since the Plus meeting? And then also, how far off are we from actually being able to publicly view a master plan of sorts?
Through the chair, since the briefing that Plus provided to council, I would have been to at least 2 or 3 PCGs. We're typically meeting about once a month, sometimes every 2 or 3 weeks. Timetable on a master plan, I don't know if there's a specific date in mind with Plus at this point, but given they've said 15 months to do the process and to have an amendment basically endorsed by the minister, that's the aspiration. You would therefore mathematically think it's sometime in the next 6 to 9 months, there'd be a master plan based on what they've said. But ultimately, that is a process they'll go through, and they will advise council when there's a master plan they want feedback on.
Yep. Councillor Sample.
Yes, through the chair, Andrew, this is Concordia update and submission, and we're talking about and everything, the whole lot. But take it into consideration that Hewitt is the Light Regional Council. Any discussions on that at all, or is this only discussion on Hewitt? Because there's certainly lots of talk, and I know certainly the deputy mayor and a number of other councillors have done their own walking and talking, and none of them want to come into Gawler. So where does Hewitt fit into this briefing that we're talking about here?
This is not a boundary reform motion. This is just about whether or not we have boundary reform. Concordia development's happening.
Yeah.
The Hewitt's already built into our models of what Greater Gawler is in the previous motions that we've had, you know. Greater Gawler's included Roseworthy, Hewitt, Concordia, Cowbeaver, these areas that have Gawler as their regional centre but aren't in the council. But this is specifically around working with the government. I don't know.
Yep.
Have,
Well, all right, can I just finish off there, what councillor Koch said? There seems to be, there's other plans laying around about Concordia that was discussed, or about a road going across from the Brossa Road to the Sturt Highway. Because the person that owns the land where the proposed road is going to come out, when they did up the Sturt Highway and that sort of thing, I was actually witness to the plan because I was mayor, and that sort of thing. And the area there has been totally made ready for a road to come into it and that sort of stuff. And because I said, why is this here so good like this? He said, this is where the link road is going to come in at McDonald's Farm out there on the Sturt Highway. Are you aware of any of that?
Through the chair, I think it's relatively widely known that there's a recommendation for some period of time. I think it might have been mentioned in the council briefing that they've always wanted to explore how Concordia would connect to the wider road network. So as usual, you have good contacts who have local knowledge. But in terms of whether there's been any detailed concept design or anything else, I haven't seen it. I think, as I said before, we talked before about rail corridors, for example, and crossing Main North Road and Murray Street. That's a point in time. And in terms of what the final strategy says and how the master plan responds and who pays for what, that's all down the track. We really don't know. And when Plus is in a position to feel satisfied they've got a financial model that works and infrastructure they believe the government and the private sector developer are happy with, I'm sure they'll share it with us and they'll share it with Barossa.
any other discussion? If not, we'll go back into meeting procedure and look for a mover for this motion. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just quickly. I think this report and the ways forward is a sensible one. I'm putting us at the table regardless if the land is in our LGA is a smart play, I believe, because we all agree when it doesn't really matter where you sit on boundary reform as it sits right now. We agree that there is going to be an effect to our town because of this regional development. Right now, we're talking about Concordia, but realistically, we need to be looking at Roseworthy, we need to be looking at Freeling, and we need to be looking as a greater region. And when I say effect, I'm not always talking about a negative impost either here. There are positive effects, should we position ourselves right, that we can also benefit from. Some of this infrastructure that we're talking about the link road going to Sturt Highway. Personally, I think that's a must. How that's going to happen, I'm happy to leave that with the project control group to be able to come back with a couple of identified options moving forward. Who pays for it? Again, I take on board what Andrew has said, and yeah, we need to look at that. What I do provide a little bit of comfort in is the fact that this isn't in our council area at this point in time, and some of those costs, will fall on the council of whose area it is at the time. But I think the initial conversations here are good ones to be having. We also talk about the train line. We're the end of the line here in Gawler. Now, we do benefit from that, but there's also an impost on our car parks and stuff that we also don't benefit from, right? So I see the benefit of moving that end of line to the next big development, but we also need to weigh up what we lose in that as well. There's a balancing act here, and if done wrong, we could be ring-rooted around and be a ghost town. If done right, we can leverage the mutual benefits that we offer as a regional hub that we do sort of advertise ourselves at. So, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation and I appreciate the update. I think the updates flowing through consistently is what we need in this space because it's really, really easy to lose control of information when opinion can go out and spread like wildfire sometimes. So these keep the facts moving forward. So I thank you for that.
Seconder? Yeah, councillor Kosh.
Yeah, look, happy to second it. It's good information. I just want to keep on repeating that sometimes you can get caught up in the excitement and euphoria of something new and exciting without doing the baseline understanding of whether something's feasible and is actually going to work. There's a cost benefit analysis for everybody. So just make sure that we all take that into account and not just run with the hounds. Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, Mover, are you happy to? Yep, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, carried unanimously. That brings us to number 8, information reports, environment and regulatory services update. And I think we have our environment and regulatory services manager here, Jack Dazanos. Did you wish to say something?
Through the chair. Basically, I'd just like to run through the report very quickly, open it up to the members for any questions as we may go through. And if there's any concerns, we'll leave it to the end. But just to provide a bit of a snapshot of what the team does in the environment and regulatory services area. As you're all probably aware, we're consisting of our environmental health officers, our immunisation program, community safety officers, our community safety admin officer, and myself as the manager of the department. There's an outline of the duties that we perform as part of the department in council, and I'm not going to go through them all, but if there's any questions in relation to some of those headings or topics, I'm happy to sort of go back and cover off. But very, very quickly, our food and public health business inspections. We do a lot of work in communicable diseases, contaminated land investigation, pollution control, waste management, our hard waste, and all the work that we do with NORMA from an operations perspective. Work with all the regulations and the legislation under the Food Act, public health premises, which we classify under all those businesses in Gawler that, have warm water systems, wastewater systems, domestic and commercial waste control systems, hairdressers, beauty, tattoo parlours, health spas. We monitor our swimming pools and spas. We undertake our school immunisation program, and we offer some community immunisation programs as well down at the Sport and Community Centre. And just going on, SRFs is another biggie. We have 3 SRFs within the Gawler Council area, but I'll get through those as we work our way through. Enforcing our council bylaws, animal management, and that's dogs, cats, birds of abundance, pigeons and little corellas and rabbits and so forth. We work closely with the Department of Environment and Water in that space. Liquor licensing and most licensing applications that come through to the town of Gawler end up on my desk, and I hope to be bringing back to this chamber in the next 1 or 2 council meetings. The licensing enforcement branch to talk about the licensing accord, which has been considered for Gawler and the broader region. We also do a lot of work within our emergency services and emergency management space as well, through the coordination of flood, bushfire, pandemics, which we've all sort of come out of in the last couple of years. And abandoned vehicles, EPA burning permits, illegal camping and homelessness, abandoned shopping trolleys. So some of the big items which are sort of significant in terms of what it means for us as a department coming up. And this is a result of legislative review that the state government has proposed, and I've been fortunate enough to have a seat at the table with a number of these, and one being the review of the litter control and licensed local nuisance legislation, whereby I was actually involved in the actual original drafting of that legislation with the EPA, and it sort of evolved over years, but now they're discussing putting under council the investigation of light pollution, dumping of shopping trolleys, which seems to be a bit of a topic at the moment throughout, air conditioner noise, which is a relatively new one for us, but they're looking at air conditioner noise in not just commercial, but domestic situations as well, and bill posting, and that's a grey area because we have a bylaw that sort of covers bill posting already within Gawler. We are also at the table with the LGA and Department of Environment and Water for the review of the Dog and Cat Management Act, and again, some significant proposals through that legislation. And that's really tightening it up more than anything. And the one that's most important for Gawler is amendments to the Act. This council, in the past, we have a cat bylaw which sort of made it through the LRC, State Parliament, and sort of got put on hold because we were discussing things like cat detention, etc. That's now back on the agenda, and some councils have already progressed with bylaws. However, we anticipate that the Act will pick up cat registrations and along the same lines as what we do with dog registrations with feed. Again, that's the discussion that we've been having at the moment. We anticipate the Act or a draft version of the bill to be out by about December of this year. If it's any earlier, all the better. It'll give us more time to consult with the government in that respect. In the same time, they're also reviewing the DACO system, which is our Dogs and Cats Online portal, which everyone that has a dog knows. You log on and you register your dog, and your fee's paid, and away you go. They're just simply tightening that up. But the important one for us really is the cat registration aligned to dog registrations, and they are being quite. It's very interesting to see that they are taking the same position of cats wandering at large, keeping cats within your private household and things like that. So it's an interesting take. We'll see how that goes, but they've got our support in terms of local government. The Regional Public Health Plan, which is another biggie, and it's great to see some of our council members on some of those advisory groups. And it's interesting just hearing earlier the Councillor Samble talking about community transport and the issue of that. That's one of the actual lighthouse projects that the plan picks up, and that's being chaired by Light Regional Council. But the key thing in that space is really to improve transport to community centres, local services, and regional community passenger networks, and the shared purchase and operation of community bus, which is neither here nor there. That's still to be tweaked, but it's really to advocate for improved public transport, and that picks up on rail and bus and so forth. So that's at a regional level is one of the key issues that the Gawler, Light, Adelaide Plains and Barossa councils have said that we need to invest in this space. One of the other big changes that we're seeing in our section is under the food safety standards. There's a new standard called 3.2.A, which is basically a food safety management tool. Now, this came into effect in December of last year. There's a 12-month introductory period for it to become law and applicable at the end of this year, December 2023 and January 1. It literally means that every food business that falls into category 1, and category 1 are businesses that prepare food. So most of our businesses, we've got about 240 odd food premises in Gawler, not all are category 1. They will need to have, within a food business, food handlers who are trained and have knowledge in food handling, which are responsible for the training of staff. And that's going to have a bit of cost on the business. It's also going to impact our staff because they will be there to quiz these people, but it's sort of a bit of a education and a training exercise and an audit at the same time to see if those competencies are within these businesses. So that's a state government push. It's based on a national system, so it's heading towards a national system. And SA Health have confirmed, that there will be some impacts to local councils to provide this service. So what we've done up to this point is we've already started circulating all the preliminary information that's been provided to us to all our food businesses are aware of what's coming. So there'll be no surprises. Our SRFs, we have three fantastic SRFs in Gawler that look after. Sorry, what are they? An SRF? It's a support. It's. I'm going to put my impression out, Councillor. Gawler up here, Oasis, and the old Gawler Motel, which is the one at the top end of Gawler Supportive, and the old motel are owned by the same operator, and Oasis up the top of the hospital. No, it's actually licensed as an SRF as well, so we've got three. And each year we are responsible for licensing. Council has the requirement under the Act to license. It's a very old legislation. It dates back to 92, but it's is currently being reviewed. It's been in review for the last 2 years. We're still waiting to see what happens. And of course, on the report, you'll see some statistics in relation to what we do and how many issues we deal with, along with our immunisation. Another issue which is sort of dear to our heart is our squalor and unsightly conditions that we have in Gawler. We've picked off and we've identified 10 properties as being unsightly within Gawler. We've reinstated the unsightly properties register. And we've actually commenced enforcement action on a number of these premises to ensure that they do the right thing and get rid of those, unsightly and squalor type conditions.
So there, I recall that in Evanston, there was a fire recently, and I've heard that there are issues with yards packed full of trash and that kind of thing. Is that?
No, they reported on the wrong address, so it wasn't. It was a different address altogether. But that house, a garage had some stuff in it, and it was reported as a house with squalor, where in fact it wasn't. So we made that quite clear that the media got it wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, suffice to say, the squalor and the unsightliness, there are underlying issues in respect to that, and it's not an easy fix. And usually there's things such as mental health and family issues and people living alone and the like, which cause a lot of issues, and it takes a lot of time to resolve. And we work very, very closely with families, and we've had some great successes so far in Gawler with some of these unsightly premises and squalor conditions that we do come across, and some are quite severe and really do test, everybody's will to try and overcome and resolve these. We're quite happy and proud also with our immunisation program, and just some data that we've got here on how influenza has been tracking and how it tracks in Gawler and what we see. Influenza compared to COVID-19, and I think as of the end of last month we had 89, cases of COVID in Gawler. Our community safety team, again, they do such a critical role in our public spaces, and they deal with things such as illegal dumping. And you can see some of the data where, since January, it has does reduce. And we sort of put that down to, it's Christmas and everybody wants to, they're on holiday and clean out their backyard and sheds, and what do? Dump it in the quietest corner of Gawler, and we do see a fair bit of that. But we have had some success in finding out those people and taking action. And even our illegal dumping report will see our ends. You'll see 21 was quite a big year. Our permits, our guys issue permits for trading on public roads, busking, our mobile food vendors, outdoor dining, footpath displays. We do quite a bit in the EPA area for burning purpose on flammable notices, especially in our rural areas. And just, dog cat management, we've got about 7,800 registered dogs and cats in Gawler, which is quite significant from about the 3,500 we had about 5 years ago. And some significant upgrades to our dog pound, which we're quite proud of. So that's sort of in a very brief nutshell.
All right, are there any questions? Councillor Sample?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, to you, Uncle Jack. To do with at the present moment, it's gone into a big business, urban deliveries and all that sort of thing. I've had actually now 2 complaints to do with pizzas where the person that was supposed to pick the pizza up, it wasn't the person, and they went away with a lovely nice pizza and had a feed. Or does your department have anything to do with this new form of delivery, Uber Eats? I mean, everywhere you go now, somebody's delivering food. I suppose it also comes in with Woolworths and Coles and all of those now. You see their vehicles all hours of the night delivery. Do they come under any system, or is it a bit like a home-based business?
Through the chair, food delivery vehicles, and I'll put that in quotes, are monitored under the food safety legislation. Uber Eats, etc., at the moment are not.
Hmm.
These are discussions we're having with SA Health, and SA Health are looking at it at the moment to have some form of, registration or licensing of food delivery vehicles that are, private cars. A food delivery vehicle must be constructed in a way which is a food delivery vehicle.
Yeah, no, this is all these startups, the Uber and Airbnb and all of these sort of, the reason they got popular is by going around all of the legislation and requirements by doing things their own way. And I think the law is starting to catch up with some of them, but it's means that, yeah, some people just don't have any food regulations or anything, which can be a bit of trouble sometimes. Is there any other questions on this one? Deputy Mayor, and we'll go, yeah.
Just on page 45 and 51, I did notice, and you touched on it before as well, Jack, the COVID cases, 89, is that just off of the SA Health? Yeah, okay. Because I'm just noting that I don't think people are reporting to the level they were reporting, this time last year or et cetera. So those 89 cases, and I've got nothing to prove this, but I feel is a very low number in comparison to what actual cases. So I probably rattle off 89 people.
Yeah, look,
on our sites alone. It's it's just an interesting curve to see, because I don't think this highlights exactly
yeah,
what's going
no,
on.
this is not a Gola thing. This is international. People just, they're over COVID. Whether or not COVID still exists is irrelevant to them. They just don't want to think about it anymore. Councillor Solomon, no, you're good. Okay. Yeah, okay. Councillor Sample.
Yeah, only one other quick thing, and Jack's department's a very important department in our town, because it takes in so many, 35 various areas that make everything happen. And we as elected members, naturally at a party, a barbecue or something of this nature, and something goes wrong, and they say, well, who do we ring? Because we've got this problem. Well, I tell you, I got a lot of phone numbers in there, but I would never clue who to ring. And I wonder if Jack could just elaborate, is there a special number, or are we allowed to ring Jack after hours if there's a significant thing like?
What if there's a rat in your house or?
No, I know what he'll tell me, so I can ring him, you see. But I just think that, I'm not sure. Is there any elected member in the room that if you were to barbecue, Mick, and all of a sudden somebody said to you, like, I've just had a problem with this, which is one of Jack's departments that he looks after, you wouldn't know who to ring? That's what I'm asking. I think we need to have a number, or some number.
Through the chair, I think you just ring after hours.
Yeah, you get a message back.
Well, look, if we want to hire some more staff, I'm sure we can hire some night staff. Okay, no. In that case, we'll have to deal with the message banks. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, I'm going to move the motion, if I may,
Sure.
that we accept the report. And again, to thank Jack and his team. This is a really important and a very informative report. And I've already had a suggestion, talk to Donna from the marketing and communications, that perhaps in the new newsletter that we throw some spotlights on some of this work, because I think not only have I learned some information from it, but I'm sure there are people in the community who would like to know some of this outstanding work that is going on, being paid for by their rates. There's some real wins in here that I don't think the community is aware of. I didn't realise that we had, I thought I was pretty on top of the public health. I hadn't realised that we looked after the licensing of those three, what are they called? The supported residential facilities. So there you go, you learn. So I'd like to move the motion.
All right, do we have a seconder? Councillor Sample, not wish to speak? No. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor?
I think these information reports are necessary, and they do provide that overarching education of an arm of the business that is one of those fundamental services that we do need. And I'm constantly getting good feedback as well. So I just thought I'd pass that through to yourself and your team, Jack, on especially the food inspectors. You know, I think they must be really building a good rapport with those food preparation operators and everything like that. So, you know, some of those business owners really do appreciate the way you and your team go about it when, you know, they're not under the microscope, so to speak, yeah, which can be a bit confronting. I think it's more a mutual, respectful education that's allowed. I am a little bit, I guess, I'm interested to see how the new rollout happens when things start changing and more rules and more quizzes come through. I think it's going to test those relationships a little bit as that rolls out. But I think you're in a good position to be able to, yeah, leverage that. So just passing that on. But yeah, absolutely. It's one of those arms of the businesses that happens in the background. We don't actually understand why and how, but I'm sure people are the first to complain when things don't quite go their way. So having these processes and Jack and his team there is definitely a handy thing to have. And just to answer Councillor Sam's questions, I've started sending people to the CRM links to run through. It always is a little bit subjective to whatever item might be brought up. But the CRMs, yeah, are a bit easier to find. I mean, it could be a little bit easier on the website, but now I've got that link channel. It's been good to be able to funnel through. But yeah, no, I'm happy to support this, and thanks, Jack, for the update.
Any other discussion? If not, is the mover happy? Yep, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. That brings us to item 9, items listed for discussion. Being none, items listed for discussion at future meetings. Are there any questions without notice? Are there any motions without notice? If not, we'll go on to confidential reports. And the suggestion is to go into confidence and include Kate, who is on Zoom with us, and Pele from Divine, who is here in the audience. And so, yep.
Through the chair to clarify, so this will be a bit of a two-step process. So I've got Kate Voits, is that how you pronounce it, Voits? Yeah, from WGA, but we'll have a bit of a question and answer for you in regards to Oriana Waters, water harvesting and related issues which were raised in November last year, if you recall, at IS, which is one of the issues that's been ongoing discussed at Oriana Waters. I've got Pele Ronaldo from Divine, who's in the back of the room, who's here just to answer any questions and just update you, I guess, on how Divine are going with Oriana Waters. And then once those Q&A matters are resolved, I will, well, the chair will politely request them to leave the room, and then we'll go through the report that I have provided. Wendy will probably answer most of the questions that come out of that, but we'll work our way through it.
All right, and the CEO is not here, so we don't need him on the list.
Councillor Henderson, other question.
Councillor Henderson.
Happy with that explanation, but we're going into confidence now, and we hear both speakers and then continue on.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
No,
all right, so just making sure we've got the right people on the list here. So Executive Manager Development and Compliance, that's you. And then Wendy, minute taker, and then everyone else, and then the council members. All right. So do we have someone to move this? Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, I'm happy to move into confidence. And the reason we're going to be moving into confidence is that we're going to consider some legal advice, and therefore it is appropriate to go into confidence.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Kosh, any discussion? If not, I'll move the motion. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. Thanks, Jack and Richard.